Nathan Parker was a happy 5-year-old boy with bright blue eyes and a smile that could light up any room. On that Friday evening, he jumped with excitement as his grandmother's old station wagon pulled into her driveway. Weekend stays at Grandma Rose's house were his favorite thing in the world. "Can we make cookies tonight, Grandma?" Nathan asked, clutching his small backpack filled with toys. "Of course, sweetheart," Rose replied, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your mother said she'll pick you up Sunday after church." Nathan didn't know that this ordinary weekend would forever divide his life into before and after. That night, while Nathan slept peacefully in his grandmother's spare bedroom surrounded by the smell of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies, something terrible happened across town. It started with a small spark in the wiring of the Parker family home, old wiring that should have been replaced years ago. By midnight, flames had taken over the first floor. By 12:30 a.m., the fire department arrived, their sirens waking neighbors who stood helplessly on the street. By 1:15 a.m., they knew no one inside had survived. Rose was awakened by a knock on her door at 2:37 a.m. Two police officers stood there, their faces grim. Nathan slept through their hushed conversation, through his grandmother's muffled sobs, through the moment when his entire future changed direction. The next morning, Nathan sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs and waiting for his pancakes. He noticed Grandma Rose's eyes were red and puffy. "Are you sick, Grandma?" he asked. Rose sat next to him and took his small hands in hers. "Nathan, I need to tell you something very sad." Nathan listened as his grandmother explained that there had been a fire at his house. At first, he didn't understand what she meant when she said his parents and baby sister Emma weren't with us anymore. The concept of forever was too big for his 5-year-old mind. "When can I go home?" he asked. Rose's voice broke. "You'll be staying with me now, sweetheart." In the days that followed, Nathan watched adults cry at a service where 3 closed boxes sat at the front of a church. People he barely knew hugged him and told him how sorry they were. Nathan kept waiting for his mother to come pick him up on Sunday, not understanding why everyone was so sad. It was only weeks later, when he asked his grandmother for the 100th time when he could go home, that the truth began to sink in. His house was gone. His family was gone. And they were never coming back. The community of Millfield rallied around the orphan boy. Neighbors brought food and clothes. His kindergarten teacher made a special Brave Boy certificate for him. The local fire department visited his school to talk about fire safety, and the chief gave Nathan a small firefighter badge. But at night, when the house was quiet, Nathan would cry for his mother. He missed how she smelled like flowers, how his father would throw him high in the air, and how baby Emma would grab his finger with her tiny hand. Rose did her best, creating new routines and safe spaces for Nathan. She kept the few family photos she had in her home and told him stories about his parents. "Your daddy was the fastest runner in his high school," she would say, "and your mommy could draw better than anyone I knew." Nathan listened to these stories like treasures, holding tight to these small pieces of the family he was already starting to forget. At just 5 years old, he had to learn the hardest lesson life teaches: how to live with an empty space that can never be filled. 10 years passed, and Nathan Parker grew into a quiet 15-year-old with serious eyes that seemed older than his years. His grandmother's small house in Millfield became home, though sometimes it still felt temporary, as if his real family might return to claim him. Nathan sat at his desk, staring at a math problem that should have been easy. But today was April 17th, the anniversary of the fire. Days like this made focusing impossible. "Nathan," Grandma Rose called from downstairs. "Dinner's ready, honey." He sighed and closed his textbook. These anniversaries were always hardest on his grandmother. She tried to make them special with Nathan's favorite foods, but the sadness hung in the air anyway. Downstairs, Rose had prepared lasagna and garlic bread. A small photo frame sat in the center of the table, the Parker family's last Christmas picture. Nathan was 4 in the photo, sitting on his father's lap while his mother held baby Emma. "I was thinking," Rose said as they ate, "maybe we could visit the Memorial Garden tomorrow. The spring flowers are blooming." Nathan nodded, pushing food around his plate. The town had planted a small garden where their house once stood. No one had rebuilt there. People said the land was too sad. At school, Nathan was known as the fire kid. He hated it. Most students were kind, but they walked on eggshells around him. Teachers gave him special looks on bad days. Only his best friend, Carlos, treated him normally. "Dude, are you coming to Jason's party Friday?" Carlos asked during lunch the next day. "I don't know," Nathan replied. "Parties aren't really my thing." "Because of your parents?" Carlos was the only one who spoke directly about it. Nathan shrugged. "I just feel weird sometimes, having fun when they can't." Carlos nodded, understanding without pushing. "Well, if you change your mind, I'll save you some cake." In therapy, which Nathan had attended since he was 7, Dr. Martinez called this survivor's guilt. "It's common," she explained during their session that week, "but your parents would want you to enjoy your life, Nathan." "How do you know what they'd want?" Nathan asked, not angry but genuinely curious. "I barely remember them now." This was his greatest fear, forgetting. Each year, his real memories faded, replaced by stories and photographs. Sometimes he wasn't sure if he remembered his mother's laugh or just remembered Grandma Rose describing it. The hardest parts were the milestones. When Nathan made the honor roll, when he scored the winning point in basketball, when his voice deepened and he grew 5 inches in one summer. These were moments that should have been witnessed by his parents. At night, Nathan sometimes pulled out the fireproof box where Grandma Rose kept the few family items that survived: his father's watch, his mother's wedding ring, and 7 photographs saved because they had been at his grandmother's house when the fire happened. "Tell me about Dad again," Nathan would ask on the hard nights. Rose would smile sadly. "Your father could fix anything. When that old washing machine broke, everyone said to replace it. But David took it apart on the kitchen floor and had it running by dinner. He was so proud of his clever hands." Nathan studied his own hands in those moments, wondering if they looked like his father's. He wondered if he had his mother's laugh or his sister's stubbornness that Rose sometimes mentioned. At school, the guidance counselor suggested Nathan join a grief support group for teens. He resisted at first, but in that circle of kids who understood loss, Nathan finally found people who didn't look away when he talked about the fire. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy," a girl named Mia confessed during one meeting. Nathan nodded. "Like you're betraying them by moving forward." "Exactly," she said, and something in Nathan's chest loosened just a little. As his 16th birthday approached, Nathan realized something important. He had now lived more years without his family than with them. The thought terrified him. But when Carlos and his family surprised him with a birthday cake, and Grandma Rose gave him a journal that had belonged to his mother when she was his age, Nathan allowed himself to smile. He was growing up, carrying his loss with him, but not letting it define him completely. The shadow remained, but Nathan was learning to find light within it. The campus of Westlake University spread out before Nathan Parker as he carried the last box into his dormitory room. At 18, he stood taller than most of his classmates, with dark hair that often fell across his serious eyes. This was his first time living away from Millfield and Grandma Rose. "You sure you have everything you need?" Rose asked, straightening his bedding for the 3rd time. Her hands trembled slightly. Whether from age or emotion, Nathan wasn't sure. "I'm good, Grandma," he said, giving her a reassuring smile. "Carlos and his dad will check on you every week like they promised." Rose nodded, blinking back tears. "I'm so proud of you, Nathan, your scholarship, your plans. Your parents would be bursting with pride." The mention of his parents still brought a sharp pang, but it had dulled over the years into something manageable. Nathan hugged his grandmother tightly before she left, both of them pretending this separation wasn't terrifying. Nathan's roommate, Eli, arrived an hour later with music equipment and a friendly grin. "Architecture major, huh?" he said, looking at Nathan's drafting supplies. "That's cool. I'm in music production." "Architecture with a focus on safety engineering," Nathan explained, arranging his textbooks. He didn't mention that his choice was directly tied to the fire that took his family. He learned that sharing that story too early made people uncomfortable. College life moved quickly. Nathan threw himself into his studies with an intensity that surprised even his professors. When his classmates complained about the heavy workload, Nathan simply worked harder. In his first design class, while others created beautiful but impractical structures, Nathan's buildings were different. "Parker," Professor Chen said, studying his first project, "your emphasis on multiple escape routes and fire-resistant materials is commendable, but remember that beauty matters too." Nathan nodded politely, but didn't change his approach. In his mind, A beautiful death trap was still a death trap. By his sophomore year, Nathan had earned a reputation as brilliant but somewhat obsessive. His designs always included advanced safety features, sometimes at the expense of aesthetics. His work caught the attention of Dr. Ramsey, who specialized in disaster-resistant architecture. Have you considered focusing on emergency evacuation design? Dr. Ramsey asked after class one day. Your instincts for safety pathways are exceptional. Nathan hadn't considered this specialty, but the idea resonated deeply. Under Dr. Ramsey's mentorship, he began to find his true calling. During winter break of his junior year, Nathan spotted a flyer at the community center. Phoenix Group, for young adults who have lost family members to tragedy. He stood staring at it for several minutes before taking down the information. The following week, Nathan sat awkwardly in a circle with 7 other college students, each carrying their own stories of loss. When his turn came to speak, words he hadn't planned tumbled out. I was 5 when it happened. Fire. My parents and baby sister died while I was at my grandmother's house. He paused, surprised by his steady voice. Sometimes I feel like I've been designing buildings my whole life, safe buildings where families don't die in the middle of the night. The group leader, a gentle-voiced woman named Diane, smiled. Many survivors find purpose connected to their loss. Something shifted in Nathan that evening. For years, he carried his tragedy like a secret burden. Here, it was simply understood. By spring, Nathan was volunteering with Phoenix Group, talking to younger kids who had experienced similar losses. To his surprise, helping others made his own pain more manageable. You're good with them, Diane observed after Nathan spent an hour teaching a 10-year-old boy how to build a model house. You speak their language. Nathan shrugged. I remember what it feels like to have so many questions nobody can answer. His senior year arrived with job offers from prestigious firms, but Nathan chose a smaller company that specialized in community buildings and affordable housing with advanced safety features. His designs began winning recognition for their innovative approach to combining safety with accessibility. As graduation approached, Grandma Rose admired his final project displayed at the senior showcase. You've turned your pain into purpose, she said, her eyes shining with tears. That's the greatest honor you could give your family. Nathan nodded, looking at his design, a community center with a memorial garden at its heart. He was no longer just surviving his past. He was building something meaningful from it. Nathan's 25th birthday began like any other workday. He woke in his modest one-bedroom apartment, made coffee, and reviewed blueprints for the children's hospital wing he was designing. The April morning was bright and clear, with no hint that this day would change everything. His phone buzzed with birthday messages from Grandma Rose, Carlos, and colleagues from Whitman Architectural Group, where he had worked for the past 3 years. Nathan appreciated these small kindnesses, though birthdays had never been truly happy occasions since the fire. Each one simply marked another year without his family. Parker, these safety modifications look good, his boss said later that morning, reviewing Nathan's latest designs. The hospital board will be pleased. Nathan nodded, pointing to the enhanced sprinkler system he'd designed. I've added backup generators dedicated solely to the emergency systems. Even in a power outage, these safety features will function. His colleagues teased him about his safety obsession, but it had earned him respect in the industry. At 25, Nathan was already making a name for himself in family-centered safe design. After work, Nathan stopped at his mailbox in the apartment lobby. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a plain manila envelope with no return address. His name and address were typed, not handwritten. No postmark, which meant it had been hand-delivered. Back in his apartment, Nathan set the mysterious envelope aside while he accepted a video call from Grandma Rose, now 78, and still living in the same house in Millfield. Happy birthday, my sweet boy, she said, her face crinkling with love. Did you get my package? They chatted about her garden and his work, the comfortable conversation of people who had weathered tragedy together. After promising to visit soon, Nathan ended the call and finally turned his attention to the unmarked envelope. He slid his finger under the flap and pulled out a single photograph. The moment he saw it, the room seemed to tilt sideways. It was his family, his parents, himself at age 5, and baby Emma in a stroller. But this wasn't one of the few surviving photos he'd grown up with. This was new, or rather, old but never seen before. The photo showed his father standing outside what looked like an office building, speaking with a man Nathan didn't recognize. His father's face showed tension, his hand raised mid-gesture. His mother stood a few steps back, holding the stroller with baby Emma while 5-year-old Nathan looked at something off-camera. Nathan's hands trembled. The photo appeared to have been taken just days before the fire. His father wore the same blue jacket that had been described in the news reports about the bodies found in the house. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded blue ink, were 7 words that made his heart pound. There's more to the story. Look deeper. Nathan sank onto his couch, staring at the photograph. Who had sent this? Why now, 20 years after the fire? The handwriting wasn't his grandmother's, and the message suggested something Nathan had never considered, that the full truth about his family's death remained hidden. He studied the unknown man in the photo more carefully. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with a stern expression. Something about his stance suggested authority or confidence. Nathan's father didn't look happy to be speaking with him. Nathan reached for his phone, then hesitated. Should he call Grandma Rose? The police? After 20 years, what could this possibly mean? He took a photo of both sides of the picture and enlarged them on his computer screen, looking for any clue about where it was taken or who might have sent it. The building in the background had a logo that was partially visible, some kind of stylized bird or phoenix. That night, Nathan barely slept. The photo sat on his nightstand, raising questions he had never thought to ask. The official report had called the fire an electrical accident. He had accepted this explanation his entire life. Now, on his 25th birthday, 7 words written on the back of a photograph had cracked open a door he never knew existed. Beyond that door lay the possibility that everything he believed about his family's death might be wrong. As dawn broke, Nathan made a decision. He would find the truth, whatever it might be. He owed his family that much. The Millfield Public Library hadn't changed much in 20 years. Nathan sat at a microfilm machine in the back corner, scrolling through old newspaper archives. 3 days had passed since the mysterious photograph arrived, and he had taken emergency leave from work, telling his boss only that a family matter required his attention. The screen flickered as Nathan searched through April 2005 editions of the Millfield Gazette. He had already spent hours looking at the reports of the fire, reading details he had avoided for most of his life. Fire claims family of 3, child survives, read one headline. The articles described an electrical fire that started in the wall of the living room, likely caused by old wiring. There were quotes from firefighters about how quickly the blaze had spread. Nathan's name was mentioned only as the surviving child who was staying with his grandmother. He rubbed his tired eyes. Nothing in these articles suggested anything suspicious, but that photograph and its cryptic message kept driving him forward. Nathan Parker? Is that you? He looked up to see Mrs. Henley, his old high school librarian, now with completely gray hair but the same kind smile. It's been a while, she said. Are you visiting your grandmother? Yes, but I'm also researching something, Nathan replied, deciding to take a chance. Mrs. Henley, do you remember much about my parents? About my father's job? Her expression softened with sympathy. Your father worked at Bradford accounting firm. He was well respected, quiet, like you, but very precise. Your mother taught kindergarten at Millfield Elementary. Did my father ever seem worried about anything at work? Any problems? Mrs. Henley tilted her head, thinking. I wouldn't know about that, dear. But, she hesitated. You might want to talk to Michael Downing. He was your father's friend. They played golf together. Nathan wrote down the name, thanking her. As the library closed, he drove to his grandmother's house, where he was staying during his visit. He hadn't shown her the photograph yet, unsure how it might affect her. The next morning, Nathan found Michael Downing's address through an online search. The man still lived in Millfield, in a modest house on Oak Street. Nathan stood on the porch, heart pounding, and rang the doorbell. A man in his early 60s opened the door, his eyebrows rising in surprise as he looked at Nathan. Good God, he said quietly. You look just like David. I'm Nathan Parker, he said, extending his hand. David Parker's son. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he shook Nathan's. I know who you are. I was at your 5th birthday party, though you probably don't remember. What brings you here? Inside Michael's living room, Nathan carefully placed the photograph on the coffee table. Someone sent me this recently. I've never seen it before. Michael put on reading glasses and studied the image. His face paled visibly. Where did you get this? He asked sharply. It was sent anonymously. Do you recognize the man talking to my father? Michael removed his glasses slowly. That's Robert Caldwell. He owned Bradford Accounting where your father worked. He pointed to the building in the background. This was taken outside their offices. The message on the back says there's more to the story, Nathan said. What does that mean, Mr. Damming? Michael stared at Nathan for a long moment before speaking. A week before the fire, your father called me. He was worried. He said he'd found some inconsistencies in the company books, large sums of money moving through accounts that didn't make sense. Nathan felt a chill run through him. Did he report it? He told me he was going to talk to Caldwell directly before going to authorities. This photo. Michael tapped it gently. This must be that conversation. Are you saying my family's death wasn't an accident? Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Michael looked troubled. I never had proof of anything. After your family died, I wondered, but without evidence. He shook his head. The fire investigation ruled it an accident. Where is Robert Caldwell now? Nathan asked. He sold the firm about a year after the fire. Made millions. Last I heard, he's some kind of local politician now. City council or something. Nathan carefully put the photo back in his pocket, his mind racing. For 20 years, he had believed his family died because of faulty wiring. Now, a different possibility was emerging, one that made his stomach turn. Thank you for talking with me, Nathan said as he stood to leave. Michael caught his arm. Be careful, Nathan. If what your father suspected was true, and if there's any connection to the fire, these aren't people you want to provoke. Nathan nodded, but as he walked to his car, he knew he couldn't stop now. The truth, however dangerous, was waiting to be found. Nathan returned to his apartment late Sunday night, his mind swirling with questions about Robert Caldwell and his father's discoveries. He unlocked his door, flipped on the light, and froze. Someone had been here. The apartment looked almost normal, but Nathan noticed small differences. His laptop was closed. He always left it open. Books on his shelf were rearranged. The drawer of his desk was slightly open. Heart pounding, he checked his hiding place behind the air vent where he'd left the photograph. It was still there. Nathan breathed a sigh of relief, then jumped as his phone rang with an unknown number. Hello, he answered cautiously. Stop digging, said a man's voice, low and threatening. What happened 20 years ago should stay buried. The line went dead. Nathan stood motionless in his violated apartment, fear mixing with anger. Someone knew what he was doing and wanted him to stop. The next morning, Nathan called in sick to work and made 2 important phone calls. The first was to Elaine Myers, a journalist who had covered the fire 20 years ago. The second was to Detective Harris, now retired, who had investigated the case. Elaine agreed to meet him for lunch. At 60, she had gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing as Nathan slid the photograph across the table. Where did you get this? She asked, her reporter's instincts immediately alert. It was sent to me anonymously, Nathan explained. That's Robert Caldwell with my father. Elaine studied the photo carefully. I remember Caldwell. Big name in town, especially now. He's on the city council, rumored to be running for mayor next year. My father found problems with the accounting at Bradford's firm before he died, Nathan said quietly. Last night, someone broke into my apartment and warned me to stop investigating. Elaine's eyes narrowed. That makes this more interesting. She tapped the photo thoughtfully. Look, I didn't cover just your family's fire. I covered 3 house fires that year, all ruled accidents. Were they connected? I couldn't prove anything at the time. She leaned forward. But one victim was a health inspector who'd recently failed one of Caldwell's restaurant investments. Another was a journalist looking into local business corruption. Nathan felt cold despite the worn restaurant, and my father found financial irregularities. Elaine nodded slowly. I need to check my old notes, talk to some sources. This could be dangerous, Nathan. Someone's already threatened me, he replied. I need to know the truth. That afternoon, Nathan met Detective Harris at a small park. The retired policeman was in his 70s now, with a cane and weathered face. I remember your family's case, Harris said after examining the photograph. We followed protocol on the fire investigation. Everything pointed to an electrical fault. But what if someone made it look that way? Nathan pressed. Harris frowned. We didn't find evidence of that. Did you look for it? Did you know my father had discovered financial problems at Caldwell's company? The old detective's face changed slightly. That information wasn't provided to us. Would it have changed your investigation if you'd known? Harris tapped his cane on the ground. It would have raised questions, certainly. He looked at Nathan with sad eyes. There were budget cuts that year. Pressure to close cases quickly. As they parted, Harris gripped Nathan's arm. Be careful, son. If what you're suggesting is true, you're dealing with powerful people. Consider taking this to the current police department. Later that evening, Nathan's doorbell rang. He approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. It was Elaine, looking agitated. I shouldn't be here, she said when he opened the door. But I found something. Old bank records a source leaked to me years ago. 3 companies that worked with Bradford Accounting show unusual payment patterns right before your father died. Nathan invited her in, but she shook her head. Not safe. But there's a connection between those companies and 2 current city officials, including Caldwell. She handed him a sealed envelope. Make copies. Keep them in different places. As she turned to leave, she added, I'm meeting my old source tomorrow. I'll call you after. That call never came. Instead, Nathan woke to news that veteran journalist Elaine Myers had been hospitalized after a car accident on a deserted road. Nathan's hands shook as he opened Elaine's envelope. Inside were financial documents with his father's handwriting in the margins. On one page, his father had written, Offshore accounts? Need to verify these transactions. Nathan realized he was no longer just seeking closure, he was continuing his father's work, and whoever had silenced his family 20 years ago was still powerful enough to be dangerous today. Nathan sat in District Attorney Elena Martinez's office, his hands clasped tightly together. Beside him sat Detective James Wilson, a serious man with 20 years on the police force. On the table between them lay an evidence folder containing everything Nathan had gathered, the mysterious photograph, his father's notes, Elaine's research, and statements from Michael Downing and retired Detective Harris. Elaine Myers was investigating him when she had her accident, Nathan replied. She's still in the hospital with a broken leg and concussion. The driver who hit her was never found. Detective Wilson opened the folder. We've reviewed everything. There's enough here to justify reopening the investigation into your family's fire. Nathan felt a surge of hope. For 3 weeks since Elaine's accident, he had been gathering evidence, making copies, hiding them in secure locations. He had stopped going to work, using all his savings to focus on this case. Someone had slashed his car tires last week, another warning he had ignored. What happens now? Nathan asked. We move carefully, Martinez said. Wilson's team will re-examine the original fire evidence. We'll interview witnesses again, and we'll look into these financial records that your father discovered. What about Caldwell? Nathan asked. He's announcing his mayoral campaign next month. We don't approach him until we have something solid, Wilson said firmly. If he's behind this, he's been covering his tracks for 20 years. As Nathan left the meeting, his phone rang. It was Grandma Rose. Nathan, she said, her voice shaking. Someone broke into my house last night while I was at my sister's. They didn't take anything valuable, but all your parents' old papers are gone. A cold anger filled Nathan. Grandma, I want you to stay with Aunt Linda a little longer. Don't tell anyone where you are. That evening, Nathan received an unexpected visitor. A middle-aged man in a delivery uniform rang his doorbell, handed him a small package, and left without a word. Inside was a USB drive with a note, from Elaine, insurance policy. The drive contained dozens of files, interviews, financial records, and photographs from Elaine's investigations spanning years. Among them was a folder labeled Bradford/Parker. Nathan opened it with trembling hands. Inside was the missing piece, an email his father had sent to himself the day before the fire, detailing how Caldwell and city official Thomas Green had been laundering money through fake construction projects. His father had written that he would be going to the FBI the following day. Nathan immediately called Detective Wilson, who arrived within the hour with a computer forensics expert. They authenticated the email and added it to their growing case file. The next morning, headlines rocked Millfield. Police raid homes and offices of city officials. Robert Caldwell and Thomas Green were taken in for questioning. Search warrants have been executed based on new evidence in several cold cases, including the Parker family fire. Nathan watched the news with a mixture of relief and anxiety. For the first time in 20 years, the truth was coming to light, but he knew the fight wasn't over. Over the following weeks, the case built steadily. Forensic experts re-examined evidence from the fire and found traces of accelerant that had been overlooked in the original investigation. A former employee of Bradford Accounting came forward with testimony about Caldwell's corrupt practices. Most standing was the testimony of an elderly man named Frank Russo, who admitted to being hired by Green to create an electrical problem at the Parker house. Russo, now dying of cancer, wanted to clear his conscience. 3 months after Nathan received the mysterious photograph, he sat in the courtroom as Robert Caldwell, Thomas Green, and Frank Russo were formally charged with the murders of David, Sarah, and Emma Parker. The evidence was overwhelming. Caldwell and Green had orchestrated the fire to silence David Parker before he could expose their money laundering operation. They had arranged similar accidents for others who threatened their corruption over the years. As Nathan left the courthouse that day, a reporter called out, "How does it feel to finally get justice for your family?" Nathan paused, looking up at the clear blue sky. "This isn't just about my family anymore. It's about everyone they hurt. The truth matters, even 20 years later." That night, Nathan sat alone in his apartment, holding the photograph that had started everything. He still didn't know who had sent it, or why they had waited 20 years. But tomorrow, he would visit his grandmother, and together they would finally begin to heal from a wound that had never properly closed. Justice had been delayed, but it would not be denied. 5 years had passed since the trial that put Robert Caldwell and his accomplices behind bars. Nathan Parker, now 30, stood outside the newly completed Parker Family Memorial Center in downtown Millfield. The modern building gleamed in the morning sunlight, its walls of fireproof glass reflecting the blue sky. "It's beautiful, Nathan," Grandma Rose said, holding his arm. At 83, she moved slowly, but her eyes remained sharp and bright. "Your parents would be so proud." Nathan smiled down at her. "I hope so." After the trial, Nathan had returned to his architectural work with a new mission. Using the settlement money from the civil case against Caldwell's estate, he established the Parker Family Foundation. Its purpose was twofold: supporting child survivors of family tragedies and advancing fire safety in residential buildings. Today was the grand opening of the foundation's headquarters. People gathered in front, many faces familiar to Nathan from his journey to uncover the truth. Detective Wilson, now Police Chief Wilson, shook Nathan's hand warmly. "Your father started this fight for justice. You finished it." Michael Downing, his father's old friend, nodded in agreement. David always believed in doing what was right, no matter how difficult. Even Elaine Myers had come, walking with a slight limp from her accident but looking strong. "I knew there was a story here," she said with a smile. "I just didn't know it would be this big." The mystery of who sent Nathan the photograph had been solved 2 years earlier. Frank Russo, the man who had set the fire, had confessed that a young security guard at Bradford Accounting had secretly photographed the confrontation between Nathan's father and Caldwell. The guard had kept the photo out of fear, but as he faced his own mortality from illness, he had finally sent it to Nathan. He died knowing he helped bring justice, Elaine had told Nathan when they discovered the truth. Sometimes people find their courage late, but it still counts. As Nathan cut the ribbon to officially open the memorial center, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. The pain of loss had never completely disappeared, but it had transformed into something meaningful. Inside the building, a wall displayed photographs of families who had been helped by the foundation over the past 5 years. Children who, like Nathan, had lost everything but found ways to rebuild their lives. The heart of the building was a special room called Emma's Garden, named for Nathan's sister who never got the chance to grow up. Here, child survivors could meet with counselors in a safe, beautiful space filled with plants and natural light. "Mr. Parker?" A small voice drew Nathan's attention. A boy of about 8 stood looking up at him, holding his mother's hand. My dad died in a house fire last year. My mom says you help kids like me. Nathan knelt down to the boy's level. What's your name? Jason, the boy said softly. Well, Jason, I know how hard it is to lose someone you love. But you're not alone. Nathan pointed to a photograph on the wall of himself as a child with Grandma Rose. That's me when I was just a little older than you. The boy studied the picture. Did it ever stop hurting? Nathan considered his answer carefully. The hurt changes. It becomes part of your story, but not your whole story. Later that evening, after the crowds had gone, Nathan stood alone in his office. On his desk sat the photograph that had changed everything. His father confronting Caldwell, his mother and sister in the background, himself as a child looking away. He had framed it as a reminder of how a single piece of truth can illuminate decades of darkness. Beside it was a new photograph. Nathan with the first group of children to complete the Foundation's healing program. Their faces showed the same thing Nathan had discovered, that even after terrible loss, there could be purpose and even joy. Nathan touched both frames gently. 25 years ago, he had been the lone survivor of a tragedy designed to silence the truth. Now, he had transformed that silence into a voice for others. Outside his window, the lights of Millfield twinkled in the darkness. The city had changed, become more transparent, more just. And Nathan, the boy who had lost everything, had found his way not just to survival, but to a life of meaning built from the ashes of his past.